Hi folks, today we're going to be looking at Gabriele Mikutyte's portfolio. They're an aspiring environment artist and we're going to take a look over and see if we can spot any areas for improvement. So far it's looking quite promising. There's quite a few pieces of artwork there. Normally for a portfolio, you want to keep it quite concise. I know a lot of people think that you need a lot of things in there, but oftentimes it's a quality over quantity kind of situation. So we've currently got like quite a few things in here, so it might be an idea to reduce some of them, but we'll talk about that as we go along. So let's have a look-see. So we'll start with the oldest. Normally that's the best way of doing it. And if you're going to remove things, it tends to be the oldest stuff first because you want to show your strongest work. You're going to be judged by your weakest piece of work, no matter how good it is. If it's weaker than the rest of it, that's what people tend to remember. So let's have a look from the beginning. So we've got Erase concept art. Okay. So interesting start that we've got concept stuff. So this is pretty cool. Is this? I assume it's for a mobile game because it's quite like low-res style. This is pretty cool stuff. So yeah, usually with your portfolio, you want to try and keep it fairly focused on the thing that you want to do. So for example, you want to be an environment artist. Personally, I would just remove the concept art side of things. It's not really necessary. It's cool to show that you worked on this kind of project, but that's what your resume is for showing the published titles that you've got and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I personally, in my opinion, I would probably remove this one, or at least remove it for now. And then you can always put it back in later. You don't need to delete it, just, unpublish for now. Let's see, Sands of Vengeance environments. Cool, okay, so again, this time we're looking at environment art, which is good, because that's what you want to do. So you're responsible for making environments for the dungeons and arenas. Cool. Okay, so this looks awesome. Alright, so you're showing you got modular kit experience. This is really imperative for environment artists. This is something that you need to know how to do in order to be a successful environment artist, because some people think that you can just make everything bespoke, and you can in some situations, but realistically, most of the time, you're going to be using modular kits and splines and that kind of thing. So, okay, good. You got a breakdown of your textures. It's always good to see that, and you're packing textures. This is a fairly it's not a difficult technique to do. It's just that a lot of the time, well, at least back in the day, people wouldn't do it very often. They'd have separate maps for everything, but it's extremely commonplace. In fact, I think it's pretty much a standard practice wherever I've been that they pack textures. So for example, for those of you who don't know what that means that this texture here, it's the ambient occlusion map, the roughness map, and the metallic map, all in one texture. The ambient occlusion is in the red channel, the roughness is in the green channel, and the metallic is in the blue channel. Now that's pretty good. That's what you should be doing. So yeah, base color cool, and then normal map right there. The normal looks strange. Normally, pardon the pun, normally the normal map just looks like this kind of color, like a purpley. It should all be that color. So something has gone awry in your bake possibly, or maybe there's just something overlaid on top of it, but we'll check in a minute. That's cool. So that's the original block out for the level. It's good to see a process. People like to see processes, especially if you want to be an environment artist, because you need to show that you can go through the entire process, not just do the fancy bits. Because, sometimes people just focus too much on making things really pretty, but not actually functional, or not showing how they got to where they got to. So the fact that you're showing this is great. This is pretty cool. I see. See, I wouldn't have both of these shots. I'd probably get rid of this one and just have this shot to show off the detail of what you've got, because you can see the pavements in situ, in the examples above. You can see like different ways of showing stuff off there. So if you had a shot like that of the scene, that would be better than just having this kind of angled shot. This is cool. I like this, the way you're showing it off there. I'd do something about the sky. It's incredibly low res and it makes it like it stands out from everything else. Like I said before, you're going to get judged on the weakest part of anything. So the fact that like the top third of the screen is a low res sky image kind of detracts from the rest of it, no matter how good it might be. Okay, so this is nice to see. What would be cool for me to see personally is like a side-by-side. So this kind of angle, but what you would be showing is this actual angle. So it's like a before and after. You've got your block out and you've got your finished product. Then you can show the process, even like a fade through, like a GIF or something like that. That kind of thing is pretty nice and it catches the eye. This is pretty cool. And nice. Okay, great. You get to see some in-game screenshots. This is perfect. You need to be doing stuff like this. If you ever want to, like, I usually say the best way to get a job doing the thing is to do the thing. And what I mean by that is you make your own game. You make your own, no matter how small or big it might be. if you make your own product beginning to end, it shows that you know the process that it takes to get from the conceptualization phase all the way through to the publishing section of it. That's a really good thing to show you've gone through the entire pipeline and you've managed to tick every box along the way. But yeah, so this particular project, I would say you're a little bit heavy on the images for some parts of it, like these two, for example. They're showing off the same thing, so I would just get rid of the top one. I know you've said about it being embedded, but yeah, I would say get rid of that and then just keep this one. Yeah, for this, get rid of the sky, update the sky, you know, improve the sky image. But yeah, everything else, I mean, it's a mobile game, so you can't really push the visuals too far. And what you were doing is working fairly well. I think maybe the ground's a little flat, the texture you've got on the ground itself. But, you know, I know you're limited for resources using mobile. I'd be careful of stuff like this, though. Just make sure when you're unwrapping things, it's consistent and clean. Like at the moment, you know, some parts are dark, some parts are light. And there's variance between things. I appreciate this is probably because of the modular kit. You've wanted to use different bits, but what you can do is have the same piece and just have it rotated so that it's the same texturing, but it's got like different elements on the other side, so it breaks it up a little bit. That's normally a cleaner way of doing it rather than swapping out for a completely different piece. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. We'll go back to something else now. So, mining facility. Cool. Okay, let's have a look. So wait, before we watch this, let's just see. I like to see, like, this kind of thing is really important to show a description, show what you were doing and why you were doing it and what you did in that project. So, for example, if it was a team project, you'd explain which part you were responsible for. That kind of stuff's really important because, yeah, you can just show off a pretty scene, but without knowing your involvement in that scene, there's no way of judging how your work looks because they don't know what you did. So it's a lighting module. Okay, so you want to explore different lighting scenarios with day and night cycles. Cool, so you use post-processing, that's nice to see. And you do different lighting types in Unreal 5, nice skill to have. You made all of my main structures using modular asset workflow. Good, again, like we talked about before, modular asset workflow is really good for environment art. What else have we got here? So you use Maya for making the modules, nice. Maya's fairly industry standard. Blender's becoming really popular these days as well. The texture's a 2K trim sheet. Oh, the texture, 1 2K trim sheet. Okay, nice. That's what you like to see. Trim sheets are super useful. If you don't know how to use trim sheets, I'll do some tutorials at some point about that, but basically it's a really useful way of getting a lot of bang for your buck. So you can use one texture to do a lot of work. As you can see here, there are a lot of things here, and if they're just using one texture, it's pretty impressive. So the main drill, floodlights, screens, and solar panels are separate 2K texture sheets. Oh, okay, so yeah, so your hero assets basically have their own textures. That's fine, they normally do. Foliage and rocks are quick scale megascans. Okay, cool, that's perfect, you should be saying that. For anybody who doesn't say that, that's a problem. You want to be explaining the things that you did and the things that you didn't do. Because if you get a job, like say for example, you're going for a job and they really like the foliage that's in the scene, but it turns out that foliage was just megascans all along. You are going to look a bit like a fool when you go through your interview process and you go through maybe an art test or something and you can't get up to the level that they're expecting because you didn't say in the original piece that you used megascans for that. Which is fine for presentation purposes at times, so long as you say you did it. So let's have a look. Okay, it's pretty cool. It's nice to get a little bit of motion. I mean, you know, it's not super necessary, but I do feel like it does help catch the eye, and it doesn't. Like, this is a good way of keeping the same kind of angle but having a very slight tilt to it. It kind of adds some motion to it, but it doesn't mean you have to make a whole super distant vista work and that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Okay. So this is the big drill you were talking about. That's pretty cool. I'd be careful about the normal mapping stuff on here. Seems a bit extreme. But we'll have a look at that in a second. Okay, another panning shot. So again, I think we've got a similar situation to before where there's kind of a lot of the same thing. Like, I appreciate you showing off the hero asset here. But personally, I'd probably... Sorry, I'm moving about loads here. I'd probably lose this shot. Just have this one showing it off. And then you'd show it more in detail in some renders. Okay, there's a different time of day. Okay, let's see. Oh, so you're exploring the colour palette here. Okay, yeah, good. It's nice that you describe things, by the way. Every image should have some sort of description. Okay, night lighting and night lighting option 2. Cool. So it's good that you're showing variation. Personally, I would put these on the same sheet, just to save having 2 different versions like that. Oh, this is good though. You want to see breakdowns. This is what's known as a technical breakdown. So you can show your modular pieces and you're showing your wireframe to display the way that you actually constructed the elements, because that's really important. A lot of people don't show wireframes in portfolios, and it's usually a cop-out because it's a portfolio piece. Sometimes people don't tackle it the way you actually would in a professional environment, and by that I mean they cut corners here and there. They don't use a very efficient modeling method or that kind of stuff. So usually the wireframes are a mess, and that's why they don't want to show them. However, the reason for the portfolio is to get work, and if you're going to get work, you need to be doing things properly. Now, you're not expected to do things perfectly as like a junior or an associate artist, but you are expected to, you know, basically if you show the current skill level that you're at, we know how to nurture and change that, you know, how to adapt into something a bit of a stronger artist would do. However, if you don't show your wireframe, then we can't do that. So, you know, normally if there's no, like, I know some art directors are quite strict in the sense of if there's no wireframe, they simply won't look at it. So just keep that in mind. There's some, you know, some people are like that. Yeah, the scene, it's pretty cool. It's fairly straightforward. I don't really, like, I get the idea was like a lighting test, a lighting scenario change, but to me it's kind of scattershot where it's like this lighting, then this lighting, then this lighting, then this lighting. You know, I'd rather see just 2 or 3 quite concise images showing here's scenario 1 from a couple of angles, but like on one image, but sort of 2 smaller images within it, and then another one here's scenario 2 from the same 2 angles. So that way you've got the consistency and it shows how things have changed between them. But yeah, personally I would get rid of this video part, because whilst it's cool that you're showing off the asset, it's not really, it doesn't hold up as well up close as it does from a sort of a mid-range. So it's fine from here, like this works okay, this is not a problem, it shows off the lighting and stuff. But yeah, here all that catches my eye is this normal detail on top and how it feels off. So yeah, just, you know, take that as you will. Stuff like this as well, the lighting, there's some jagged edges on the lighting here, so I would just spend a couple more polys on that, which we can probably see in the wireframe down here. Oh no, actually the lights aren't in there. Okay, cool. Just keep an eye on stuff like that. You want to make sure whatever you've got in the scene is visible. Unless, I guess that's just showing what's on this texture sheet, so that's fair enough. You did mention that things are on separate texture sheets, so it'd be good to see them. But anyway, let's go to our next part. Okay, so this project is called The Soup of Stars. This was made, oh, for the Grads and Games contest. Nice, search for a star. That's a great competition. I've touched on that before. It's really fun. Right, so I can see, let me see. So you're very excited. You got nominated for the One to Watch badge. Nice, good job, you. This is really cool. I can see why. Yeah, it's a nice scene. It's quite well composed. I like the kind of the vibe of this scene in general. Like, it's got that nice kind of like Warcraft, like fantasy vibe to it. Interesting. You've got this kind of like emissive here. I assume it's because the bottle's meant to be some sort of potion or some sort of poison. But I think you've used like one light, I assume, just here, because you can see it's casting outwards. But that doesn't really help sell the illusion that these are glowing. So what I would suggest instead is to have these have an emissive texture on them, if you were to have them glow, or to have a light underneath them. But that would have to be individual, so maybe not the best bet. But yeah, either way, lighting this part alone, you can kind of see the spot of where the light is. So just be careful of that kind of stuff, because for example, this label wouldn't be lit up on that side of the bottle. So if you imagine this part here where it is lit up, there's no light source there for that to happen, other than maybe some bounce light off the barrel, but that would be really strong for that to be bounce light. But yeah, just keep an eye on that kind of stuff. But I like what you've got here. I like the storytelling involved here. So you know, you've got some meat and a knife and a map and stuff. Let me see, what have you got here? Fish, cool. This kind of stuff I'd be careful of, like the sporadic grass. I get what you're going with, but I think it's so it's so minimally used that it kind of stands out as a thing of like, why is it there, you know? I'd say either use it a little bit more or remove it. And stuff like this as well, be careful. I get why you've done it. It's the end piece of the trim, most likely. So that's why it's there, but it is exactly the same as this one. So if you do only have one end on your trim, which I'd normally recommend having 2, but if you do just have one, then at least rotate it or break it up in some way, or put some sort of set dressing on top of it. So, you know, maybe have a barrel here instead. so as that it's kind of blocking that edge off. Or maybe have, like, if you do have some of this grass, have some more of it here so that it kind of goes over that detail, so it's not exactly the same both sides. But yeah, this is really, I do like this. This is great. Yeah, and you've got a nice kind of like spiral composition thing going on here with the path and the glow over here, so it's nice. So I see what's happening here. You've got like this sort of resource of glowing light, then you've got the barrel of it here. Ooh, I like the telescope as well. It's good to show this kind of exploration. Oh, well, it's not a telescope, is it? Is it a chimney? Okay, that might need some sort of clarity of what that is, because it looks like a telescope, but then it doesn't lead to anywhere. So I'm curious how you'd use that. So try and think of the construction methods of things as well and the purpose of them. So if for example, that was a telescope, then I would have a little sort of like an additional step ladder somewhere to show you getting to there. I know you've got your little steps here, but to me that's to get to this kind of chopping area. But we'll look at it some more in a minute anyway. So what else we got? Your trees, they're pretty cool, but I'd be careful with how long and thin these polys are. And again, obviously it's just going to be alpha cards, but try not to make it so apparent that they're alpha cards. You've got a lot of very side-on sections here, so this kind of stuff where it's like, you know, pixel thin, that catches the eye as being artificial, which I know obviously it's a fantasy scene, it's all going to be artificial, but what I mean is it kind of loses some of that like real world believability that you'd get if it had a bit more volume to it. So for this kind of stuff, if you've got like fixed cameras, you can make sure that things are lean just a little bit more towards the camera. Or if you are not having a fixed camera, like this is multiple shots, just make sure that you go through each shot and you've got enough cards on the right kind of angles to kind of, you know, facilitate for each of the shots. I like that you've got like a little order thing here as well. So this is kind of like, it's like a traveling food merchant or like drink merchant. I like it. So stuff like this, I'd be careful of. I feel like this has been sort of sculpted and baked, but it's resulting in kind of a blobby look. And I get that it's going to be like hand-hammered rivets. They're going to be kind of blobby anyway. But it just, I don't know. I think because you've got like a hard edge here as well and a really quite blobby part, I'd say be careful with how shiny this is. I'd make it a bit rougher so that it was less obvious how kind of blobby it looks at the moment. And stuff like this as well. I think, is it a stylistic choice? It might be a stylistic choice to have this so faceted like you have with the fish as well. Which if it is, that's fine. But the fact that the barrels aren't that jagged, or the bags, means that it's only stylistic for the meat rather than for the scene. And that strikes me as a little bit odd. So what I would suggest is to spend a few more polys on the food sections themselves, or make everything more uniformly faceted if that's the style you're going for. So I see this wheel here looks a bit more faceted now, but I don't know if that's intentional. That feels maybe it's more like hard normals, which are normally errors. But anyway, just keep an eye on that kind of thing. You want your normals to be fairly uniform on wheels, and if you're going to have harder edges on them, try and do that with edges, not with actual normals themselves. So again, here we've got some more sort of faceted looks there, which again, if it's stylistically chosen to be that way, that's fine. But it's not consistent because this isn't as jagged. Yeah, so see the meat here, for example, this is slightly faceted, but not as much as the fish or the other meat. So again, just be careful, keep things consistent between the products, between the assets. Okay, so here's your texture work that you did in Substance Painter. That's pretty nice hand-painted texture work. And then there's your alpha cards. Cool. Yeah, so this is your grass that you've got. It's almost like origami. So I would definitely do more of that. Well, to be fair, it's like a snowy scene, so you probably don't want any grass there, but I get why you've done it. What I would do instead of some grass there is probably some more like spread pebble selections. So you've got your stone steps, and normally where there's stone like that, there's normally pebbles or smaller bits of stone knocking about, because over the years of people using them, they'll be chipping away, wearing down. Over the years of nature attacking it as well, it's going to be wearing down and bits are going to erode and roll away. So you're going to have sporadic bits of debris knocking about, smaller bits of stones. I think that would sell better than this than the random bits of grass. But overall, it's a nice, it's a nice bunch of props. And so you've done some sculpting in the details as well. And there's your meshes. Okay, so you got your edges on here. Yeah, so I feel like the faceted look wasn't super intentional. So I think one thing that's important to note when you're planning a scene is try and figure out how detailed you want things to be. So like how big our bevel width's going to be, for example. So if you're doing something really stylized, you're going to have quite wide bevels on objects, meaning that they're going to be really quite soft. Whereas if you're going to do something a bit more realistic, you might have slightly tighter bevels. It's like metal edges and that kind of stuff. And that would really help sell some more realism. But at the moment, you've got like this like inconsistency between each product. So for example, a piece of wood, the kind of wood that you're using is going to have a similar bevel size no matter what it is doing at the moment, whether it's a beam or it's a door frame or whatever it might be. Because it's all a similar kind of wood that you're using, you would expect it to all be the same kind of bevel width. However, some of this is tighter than others, and some of it, so see it's quite tight here, it's quite loose here. So you just want to try and make sure that all these bevel edges are roughly the same across the wood pieces at least. I'd be careful with how expensive this part's getting here. You could split that off into, you could merge this into a much lower res circle, because it's not really necessary. It's a relatively flat face. I know it's going to have a point in it because it'll be rounded slightly, but you can't really see that in the scene. So either emphasize that, make it like a dome, or don't worry about it and flatten it off a bit more. Let's see, where else are we at? Okay, so yeah, things like this. This asset is really small in comparison to the barrel, but look at how much denser it is when it comes to polys. Your edge density should be fairly uniform across the scene, but it's normally based on the object itself. So normally, the larger something is, the more edges it will require because it's larger. You see more of it, and the smaller something is, the less edges it requires because you're further away from it. So there's less of it visibly on the screen at a time, meaning that the game engine can only process so much stuff for each pixel. So if you, for example, there's a bunch of edges there that are going to be sub-pixel, meaning that from this view, from this distance, you're going to have multiple edges that are less than a pixel on my screen, meaning that they're wasted completely. So you could half that resolution from this distance and it'd be completely fine. You wouldn't notice a difference. So keep an eye on that kind of stuff. You don't want to go too detailed when it's that small. And it's good to, again, to show you textures. I like that you're doing that. Yeah, it's good to see. I would like to see your UVs as well. I know we can see your textures themselves, but it's good to see the UVs to make sure that it's being efficient, laid out properly, and things are straightened out and all that kind of stuff. But overall, I really like this scene. Again, there's bits I would fix about it, but this was probably done, you know, it's part of a challenge. So challenges are always done a bit quicker and they're always done a bit more frantically. So, you know, everyone always wants to do more stuff once it's finished. So yeah, just keep an eye on consistency throughout the scene in the future. And if you're struggling for time, if that's a reason why you do some things a bit quicker than others, then I suggest reducing the scope of what you're doing a little bit. So this is actually a pretty decent sized scene. Like, this is the kind of size you normally want to go for if you're doing something like a diorama or a beauty corner. But in the future, if you were short on time, I would probably have things like I'd lose some of the corner elements. Maybe I'd just keep well, let's let it restart. There we go. So I would probably, I'd move the stuff over a little bit so that you kind of, the edge starts here. You know, that kind of size scene. Move this over, get rid of this. And so you've got the focal point of this here and the focal point of the carriage here. And you'd have a little path. But then there'd be less work to do. You wouldn't have to worry about the stuff over here or over here. You know what I mean? So that kind of stuff, if you're running out of time, just reduce the scope of your project a little bit. Right, sorry, still loads to go through. I'll try and be a bit quicker. I am rambling a bit. Okay, nice shader. It's good to show some shader work. It's pretty cool. Showing it in use as well. Nice. And showing the graph. Cool. Yeah, that kind of stuff's funky. Normally, I mean, environment artists do shaders sometimes as well, but in the industry, if it's not an indie studio or if it's a larger studio, usually a tech artist would make shaders, and it wouldn't be the job of the environment artist. So whilst it's useful to have, it's not specifically necessary for an environment artist It's useful, but yeah, just keep that in mind. If you are really struggling for space on stuff, that's something that you could look at incorporating into a different scene. So for example, if you were to remake this at some point as like a realistic project, you could use this in that project, and then it's part of the same thing. Let's have a look at this. A shotgun, very nice. Oh, from Arcane, cool. Okay, yeah, I like this. It's nice. It matches the style that you're going for. You've got the kind of hand-painted light look, which is really cool. Yeah. The resolution seems a bit off on this part compared to this part. It might just be me, but it seems like you could do a slight sharpen filter on the very top of your stack. It's normally a pretty good way of getting just that little bit of detail back. Don't go crazy with it, make it a really low amount, but it really helps define that kind of detail very well. And if you only want it on there, you can do that as well. You can mask just that section so that it's only helping that, but realistically you want to have it fairly uniform so it doesn't stand out as being specifically sharpened. Okay, this is pretty cool. Fairly good poly distribution, which is what you want to see. Things are feeling a bit uneven here, which is, it could be intentional because you're showing that it's used and it's kind of worn, but at the same time, like, parts of this are smoother than other parts, so try and keep things a bit more uniform where you can. This kind of stuff, for example, where it connects here, instead of going all the way through and then that's making this way smoother, if you're trying to keep things uniform between everything, that is, you can merge the edges here as they go up, so that you end up here, you've got two, and then it merges down to one, and then you'll have that one middle line go through it. Okay, so, oh, this is your poly count, 6,154 tries, right? Okay, and yeah, parts like this as well. So you can see things are fairly uniform over here, and then we're getting really tight here, because obviously it curves up, so you're going to see that that's going to be a change in how tight things are. But just be careful about how you're spending your polys. You want to keep things, not everything has to be even all the time, but you do want to make sure that you don't get too many kind of pinch areas, because that tends to be a bit obvious in the model. It makes the lower poly stuff stand out more because it's next to something that's smoother than the rest of it. And you've got the actual model itself. Nice. Okay, and then there's the textures. Cool. Okay, I won't spend too long looking at the model itself, because I'm conscious I've been chatting for a while now about your stuff, so I don't want to bore you. But yeah, nice work on that. I'd say stuff like this is worth a couple of polys just to round that off, because the rest of it, like, you know, it's not as jagged. You've got some nice smoothness going on, and then here it's like just a sudden 45-degree angle. So that kind of thing I'd work on. This, obviously, I feel like this angle is intentional, that's fine. But yeah, nice work. I like that you've captured the Arcane style quite well. And you've not gone over the top with the hand-painted light look, because that is easy to do too much of. So yeah, well done for that. Okay, let's have a look. I like the presentation method as well. Oh, and you've lower res textures too. Cool. It's 2K and then 1K. So have you actually like reprocessed the textures for the 1K version? Because normally what you do, you do tend to get higher quality if you render at a higher resolution and then reduce that resolution in post, so like in Photoshop or something like that. So that tends to give you slightly sharper results. Rather than exporting a 1K version of the texture, you want to basically use your 2K version and reduce it to 1K, as you know, reduce a copy of it to 1K in like Photoshop or, you know, Photopea or something like that. But yeah, that's a really nice asset. And then let's see what else we've got left. Okay, World War II binoculars. This is by far the nicest thing so far. Like, it's really, really nice. So let me just have a quick look at this and see what's going on. So PBR texture and practice skills, cool. World War II binoculars, love it. I've got a friend who's just made a pair of these and it looks really good. So you went back and made a more optimized version, that's good to see. So it's rendered in Unreal 5, textured using Substance Designer and Substance Painter, and sculpted both low and poly and high poly using Maya. Okay, don't often sculpt much in Maya, so that's interesting to see. And used Megascans for background elements. Good. Again, like we said earlier, mention the Megascan stuff. And shout out to Joseph Beecham for helping out. That's good. Good job. That's nice. So, yes. Okay, the roughness variation is really nice here. A good way of showing your sort of surface separation, or if you're trying to figure out how to show that this part is metal and this part is like a rubbery plastic, is to use your buffer visualization for roughness in Unreal and just check that there is enough variation between the two of them. You want to stay in a realistic boundary so that your roughness levels are accurate to what plastic would be. But if you need to give it a very slight nudge just to make it more contrasted to the metal, then you do that because it really makes it stand out and it really helps sell it sometimes. But you're doing a really nice job here. Well done. There's a slight bit of bubbling happening here, so I can't tell if this is supposed to be like slightly dented in or slightly, slightly concave or slightly convex. You might want to model a part of that in so that it's a bit more obvious. But I mean, your textures are carrying a lot here. It's really good. It's nice to see. This is a great shot. Like the studio white walls, it really helps sell the. It's like a product shoot, you know. And I like this kind of aging you've got going on here, the splitting stuff. Let me see. Okay, it's a little extreme here, so I'll be curious what the reason was. You want to showcase wear and tear on the binoculars. Okay, that's fine to showcase wear and tear, but I would be careful of going this extreme because if there's that much damage on that part of an object, you'd expect it to be on more of it, or at least have more of a fall off. So, for example, if this damage was caused by it being on fire, for example, then you would expect more singes and stuff like that to be spreading further out. But if it's been dropped or if it's just years of wear and tear, you'd expect the wear and tear to be in a wider area. Even if it was just years of neglect because it's been sat in a cupboard for however long, you'd expect more pockets or more spots of that to have happened in that time due to condensation and moisture and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is cool, and I see that you've got your lenses in there, which is good. You've not kind of faked it. I'm feeling like this is kind of rounded. See this specular highlight here? It's making the end seem like it's kind of domed out a little bit, and if that's the case, that's cool, but it kind of sells it here that it's more flat. So I'd say you need to tighten your bevels a little bit around the edges here, and then that'll help flatten the normal out a little bit. Unless it is domed, in which case just leave it, but it seems like it should be flatter. This is a very nice presentation. I like what you've done here. Again, showing off your textures, great stuff. Personally, like I said before, oh, you've done it, never mind. I was going to say, like I said before, I would show the UVs themselves so we can see that you're straightening out your shells and that kind of stuff. Because yeah, for those of you who don't know, it's normally best to straighten out UV shells where you can. Stuff like this, you don't want any kind of waviness going on, because when you bake, if you bake your normals down and any of your UV shells are on angles, that will result in some stepping going on in your normal map because the pixels can't align perfectly. So when the pixels are aligned perfectly, you get a completely straight line, completely smooth. You can't tell it's pixelated at all. But if it's on a slight, very slight angle, you'll start to see that. So you want to reduce that as much as possible. Okay, so again, the same as before, you've got a lower resolution version, which is cool to see. And yeah, I can see how you've reduced things. You could probably reduce some of this further, to be honest, because this, like, only if you're trying to get a lower, like a low poly version, because this edge here doesn't change much at all. So I'd say you could probably merge these two together, merge these two together, you know, that kind of thing. Just, I would leave them as they are because they're supporting a rounder shape, but this is supporting a straighter shape, so you don't really need to worry about that. These curves I'd leave as they are, but everything in between you could reduce some more. Same with these parts here, you could definitely reduce some of this internal area. But again, that's me being picky. This is an amazing asset. I really like what you've done with this. And also, it's quite a reduction without much of a visual change, which is great to see. So the actual texture work itself, I'd say isn't really necessary to have a new version. And I can see here you've done a new version here because these are different. So like I said before, I wouldn't really process a 1K version from Painter, because what happens sometimes if you reduce the actual resolution of the Painter file itself, sometimes the filters that you've used can actually fail. And by that, what I mean by that is, if you're using something like a cells procedural as a mask for something, and then you reduce the quality of the cells, if they're really thin, they'll break down and bleed into each other, and that'll result in your mask going a little bit haywire, which might have been what happened here, because it's not in this version, unless you decided to paint in more details for your lower version, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, I assume that's what's happened. So yeah, like I said before, if you're going to do a 1K version of something, do the 2K version and then reduce it. And this is a nice presentation technique. I think, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's like showing it in-game as an in-game item. Personally, I would choose a different angle to this, a bit more dynamic angle, because this is completely flat on. So you'd want something more like that maybe, or more of a dynamic angle like this, just for showing how it can, you know, just it shows more of it off rather than just the flat one side. Okay, what else we got left? Half timbered house. This is a beautiful scene. Look at that. Okay, so this is kind of like, it's got like a Genshin Impact kind of vibes going on to it, which is kind of cool. I like it. One thing I'll be careful with, it looks like, I love the time of day changes, by the way. It looks like using RVT or something like that to control the colour of the grass based on the texture underneath. But be careful, because yes, you would have some of the edge grass be a bit darker near the mud. But at the moment, this has taken on the colour of the mud fully, and this is really tall grass. So what you would normally do, like, you don't get grass that's this kind of brown. You do when it's very small, because it normally gets covered in the dirt or the dust or the mud. So what you would do in that situation is the same mask that you're using to drive the colour change, you can use that mask to drive the height of the grass as well. So you can tell it in the brown areas, I want the height to be between this range of height. You know, like, so between like 0.2 and 0.8. And then everything that's green, I want to be from 0.7 to 1.5. You know, so that way you've got that smaller range of stuff is in the brown area, and it won't go taller than that in the brown area. And then in the green area, you've got a bigger range of taller grass. I like these kind of colour variations you've got going on. It's very nice. Stuff like this I'd be careful of though, because it's quite up close, and it's good that it kind of frames your scene nicely, but it's quite distracting in the sense of it's very low poly here. Like, this kind of just jumps out as being low poly cards. So what I would do is I'd add a few more polys to these up close elements, because they detract from the really nice stuff. I'd probably also give a slight blur to the outsides, to be honest. Maybe a slight blurry vignette, so that you're just focusing on what you want to see in the middle, and then it shows off your scene in a better light then. Oh, this night scene's great. I love this very slight mist going on as well. Oh, you got like some glowing stuff back here. That's cool. Oh, is that just a break in the trees maybe? Because it's happening over here as well. Interesting. Oh, nice progress shots. We like to see this. This is good to see, because we want to know that you, like I said earlier, we want to know that you've got the ability to see something through in multiple stages, and showing something like this will show the different stages of what you've got. These tree trunks I would change. I think they're kind of distracting because they're so bright and they're so simple. So what I would do is I would make them into, like, I get you going for like kind of that silver birchy kind of look, but I would go for something a bit less saturated, like as in a little bit darker as well. So something either more towards a grey or a brown, just to take the edge off it, because at the moment, if you squint and look at that scene, you're seeing two light bars either side, and it kind of takes away from the central focal point. So we're trying to detract from that. This is beautiful. Cool, and then another shot at the bottom. I don't know how necessary this last shot is. I get you sort of zooming in through the trees to show it off more, but I would say that's not really required, because you've spent the whole time establishing that it's as it is. You don't really need to show it off again from this different angle. But yeah, great work. I love that. Okay, All West Saloon, almost done. The All West Saloon. So you wanted to create a realistic saloon interior scene to go with your Winchester rifle. Okay, cool. So you made the rifle and you want to make a scene that works around it. Very ambitious. I like it. Okay, so yeah, this is a nice little scene. These lights are misbehaving. I think it's the light outside of the light shades here, and then these ones are just knockout lights on them and just emissive lampshades. It feels off basically. So you want these to be fairly uniform. Okay, and it's good you've got the slight offset going on with the stools, which I was looking out for. You don't want to have things in the same angle if it's the same asset. You might have that problem with the barrels here. They look like they're the same rotation. So you want one of these to be more rotated so it's kind of off kilter, so that you're not seeing exactly the same. Like, even if they were flipped the other way around so that the detail's on the other side, you're still going to see the same kind of straight line. So you want to rotate that a little bit if you can. Let's have a look here. Some more stuff. Spittoon, nice touch. Your normals on the floor look a little bit extreme. Oh, and definitely here, these boxes. Something about these boxes I'm not keen on. Let's have a quick look at the image a bit closer. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with these boxes. I feel like they're meant to be made out of wooden planks, but it feels flat, like they are just a tiling texture on a box, which I know they are. But I mean, you want to emphasize that they're not with the geometry a little bit. So what you could do is actually, like, since you've got a higher part here, I would pull these out a bit more. I'd extrude them a bit more so that it's kind of obvious that you've got the corner frames and then you've got the slats in between. Also, I don't think you'd really have slats going vertically. They're normally horizontally because it's more supportive then. I think that might be what's messing me up a little bit there. But anyway, back to the scene. So this is the Winchester rifle you were talking about. Cool. Okay, I think you've got a baking normal error on the edge here. It feels like it's inverted. So just keep an eye on that because that straight away that's distracting. Are the glasses there? Sorry, I'm kind of caught out by this. I feel like there's glasses there, but because of the transparency and the sort order, something's gone wrong with it. So I would look at that to make sure that you're showing what you're supposed to be showing. If you do have glass in the scene and it's not rendering properly, change it out for something else or adjust the material until it does render properly. So oftentimes glass is kind of faked, like it's opaque, but it's kind of fake with like a fake background on it. Scenes like this, it's fine. And then you've got your rifle and the stool. That's a big rifle. Jeez, it reaches 3 stools. This big flat area here is making me feel a bit strange. Like I feel like I should have something else here. Granted, I don't own a Winchester rifle. And again, I think we've got this normal error here as well. It looks like the normal may have inverted when you've baked it. So just keep an eye. Go back and check on that. Also, this floor texture, the normals feel too extreme in the small grain. So that's kind of making it a bit noisy. So what you normally want to do for your baked normals in floor textures and that kind of stuff is you reduce the very small details to pretty much nothing in the normal. That tends to just be in the base color, and then let the medium and larger details do the heavy lifting, or the roughness. So normally roughness can carry a lot more realism for smaller details than the normal map can. Okay, so there are details on the gun, you just can't really see them from this distance. That's cool though, it looks nice. So I would try and support this a bit stronger in the base color, because you just can't see it at all from this distance here. So if you had some slight, like a bit of a lighter variation between the detail and the wood itself, that would help to sell it. Also, you want to think about if this is a well-used rifle, you want some more kind of wear and tear in the sections where it would be held, or it would be reloaded especially. So you've got like some wear on the trigger, but there's not a lot of wear here on the reload arm. You can tell I own a gun, right? I don't know what it's called. But, and yeah, stuff like this, be careful of this kind of detail, because you can tell when you have a normal that's that kind of extreme, it looks like a normal map. So if you want something like that, you tend to be a bit more subtle with it. If you're going to go extreme, model some more of it in, give it some sort of supporting geometry. Oh, and a breakdown, nice. So this is the scene breakdown. These are the assets that you made for the scene. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so you got multiple pictures and a light. Okay, this is good that you've made one end piece, so then you can just rotate it and put it on the other end. You could probably just have one bit of pipe as well, then you rotate it, turn it around, give it different directions. The bar, I understand why you've got it as one piece, because a bar normally is, but you could just have the top section as one piece, and you could have the bottom section as just half of what you've got here, because you can split it in half behind this pillar, and then you can use the same pieces. So even if you had 2 of them, you can vary it up that way, and you could just have 1 or 2 of these little pillars as well, so you can rebuild it that way. That just might be a bit easier for you, because I imagine this is a pain for texture space with it being so long. And this is cool, nice modular wall kit. You've got your corner pieces, your window set. Okay, I think since you've got unique pieces anyway, it makes sense to spend a bit more a bit more detail on them. So like you could have some, you know, drips and things going on from underneath the window, or some wear and tear where it's been slid up and down a bunch of times. Get some brackets and things on it, you know, things that would add a bit more realism. Same with the saloon doors, you could have some worn areas where people have pushed into them all the time. Because think of how many dozens of people every single day a saloon would get visiting it. You know, you want to make sure you can push through that. Okay, so we've got ourselves some wireframes. Now, 14,000 tries for this chair feels very high. And this table as well. See what I mean before about like density stuff? A good way of checking if a model is too dense is basically look at it from the distance a player would see it, or from the distance a camera would render it if you're going to be just doing renders. Put the wireframe view on, and if you start to see darker areas like we can see here, that means it's got too much going on in that region. So the chair straight away, it's dark grey. And I realise this is a little bit further out than you would be in-game, but it's still very expensive for what it is. When you compare something that small to something as huge as the bar, and that has way less polys in it. Yes, it's a simpler shape, but what I mean is you could put more polys in the bar and then use vertex painting and stuff to add more realism to it, because you've now got the vertices to play with. Because every scene has a limited amount of vertices you can use, you know, a limited budget for vertices anyway. So if you're going to use them somewhere that makes more sense. So for example, up here on the stool, this is way too dense for lower elements. It should be getting less polys the further down it goes, because things are getting smaller and further out of view. But instead you're getting more polys, or maybe you're probably using the same amount of polys, but because everything's getting smaller, it's more and more condensed, and you want to try and avoid that. But again, great progress shot. I like to see this. So this shows that you've thought about the composition, you've tried to sort of keep things fairly consistent throughout, and then you've tried to adapt things based on where the camera is. That's good to do. So if you know you're going to have a couple of shots, I would try and establish them early on, and then figure out if everything works from every angle along the way. So don't get too sort of caught up on the exact angle. I used to be really bad at that, where I'd pick a spot, I'd lock my camera there, and that's exactly where it had to be. Even though a lot of the times I'd get further through the project and realise, actually, this would be better if it was slightly higher or slightly lower or whatever it might be, slightly pulled out. So yeah, don't commit too heavily to it, but it's good to see that you've got the thought process of consistency throughout the scene. Okay, and last project, the bank hall. So this is the newest one. This is only posted last week, so it's good stuff. And it's a remake of an old bank hall. I feel like I've seen this. Yes, I think I did originally. I did a feedback session with you last year at the Develop Conference, I remember now. And I think it was this scene. But yeah, this is looking really good. So let me just have a quick read of this. So you want to remake your old project from last year. So you've updated most of the textures, except for the roof and windows. Cool. You want to learn more about PCGs. Okay. So you made PCG splines. Very interesting. That is a great skill to have if you're going to be an environment artist. Again, this is something that could be tackled by tech artists, and normally is. But just like the shader stuff, it's kind of handy to have that in your back pocket just in case. Because if you go into a smaller studio or somewhere that requires a bit more of a like generalist environment artist, then it's useful to have. And it makes you more hireable. It also shows that you're willing to learn more skills. Because sometimes you need to learn specific things for specific projects. And that's useful to know you can do that. Okay, so I'm assuming this is made from a modular set. Well, hopefully we'll get to see that in a minute. And again, similar issue to last time. We're seeing the same thing from like slightly different angles, and while it's nice, I would personally pick one of the angles and stick with that, because people want to get to the good stuff. So like these two, for example, it's cool to see day and night of the same shot. That's awesome. And that top one could just be a render showing what the scene is, because you're still going to have motion in your page as a whole. It's just further down. Because I feel if you get too heavy-handed with the videos, it becomes a bit much. People are just trying to see what you're doing. It's like trying to keep up with the video all the time. This one I would lose because you're just dropping focus too much, and it's literally taking the focus off what you're trying to see. A breakdown. Okay, I'm here for the breakdowns. I like this. So cool. All right, so you've actually sculpted the things and then baked them to use as textures. That's pretty cool. I would be careful about how extreme some of these angles are if they're going to be baked. I would do that kind of stuff in geometry afterwards. Also, be careful of this kind of stuff here, where you've got pretty much the same angle on these two pieces and it stands out straight away as being almost identical. That kind of stuff just naturally draws the eye to it, so just beware. Try and give some variation. If you're going to have stuff like that, then have one of these slightly rotated, so this corner could be very slightly higher up, just so it's less, you know, less exact. You've got some more variation going on here, which is pretty good. But again, I'd have a bit of additional variation going on, not just height adjustment. This one feels a bit odd though. I wouldn't just have a brick just drop down, because that feels like that wouldn't happen. You can have it tilt slightly forwards, but not down. Like things tend to move laterally when they're cemented in. And if they do, it would be because it's like a bottom one that's been removed or something like that, and then one of them's dropped a little bit on an angle. Okay, so we've got nice texture work. This is very grimy textures. I like it, it's part of the scene, but yeah, I would maybe not go so heavy with that. Hang on, what's the green dots? Green dots use a height map generated in ZBrush. Finished in Substance Designer. Oh, the rest are fully Substance. Okay, cool. So these are all 100% Substance Designer, and these ones have been finished in Substance Designer, but were originally sculpted in ZBrush. I see. So they're using the meshes that we just saw above. That's nice to see. Yeah, so I'd be careful when you're texturing that things don't get too noisy, because at the moment, if you look at it from this kind of distance, it's kind of blotchy, and I get what you're going for. You're going for this kind of like dirty, grimy, been there for years kind of look. But I would definitely reduce some of this to not be so extreme. I would sharpen some of it up a little bit as well, so that you've got some sort of more like larger patches of variation rather than lots of noisy sections. Stuff like this as well is going to repeat like crazy. That's too big of an area of change. So that's going to be visibly repeating throughout the scene. Okay, these are pretty cool. I feel like they deserve a few more polys because they... Like the bake is really nice and intricate, but the actual mesh itself looks like it's struggling to hold all the detail, especially with it being completely flat on the sides. I'd at least give it some sort of, you know, a slight curvature or something going on. I like the detail here. This detail isn't really emphasized too much on the actual final model, so I'd maybe have some more contrast going on with the texture of the base. I appreciate it's all metal, so it wouldn't be too varied, but up here you've got a really nice variation going on with the lighter highlight sections. I would do some more of that on like around the nail beds of this part here, just to show that the higher parts have seen some more wear and tear. Plus these are lower down, they're likely to get more scuffed, or people rub them or put bags on them or whatever it might be. They're likely to get more interaction over the years. Alright, so we're at street level now. So when you're doing stuff like this, try and think how it would be constructed realistically. So for example, if there's a curb, there's not likely to be half a stone behind the entire curve, because think about the construction of that'd be an absolute pain in the backside. They would likely be butting up against the stone, so I would move this curb back a little bit just to cut off there, or move the texture forwards, whichever way you want to do it. Also, you've got lots of dirt and grime up top. Wait, is that up top or is it on the floor? Wait, I'm getting mixed up now. That's the road. Oh, okay, so your curb... Okay, so your curb seems to be higher than the road and the side. But normally you would have a curb that goes along the curb sections here at the height of the sidewalk section, and then it would drop down to the road. So yeah, that's kind of like an optical illusion, so that's probably why it looks like that. But yeah, either way, what I was going to say was I would have more grime and dirt gathering in the crevices here along the curb. So you could do that via decals or, you know, vertex painting or whatever you need to do. And here as well, for this kind of dirt and grime that you've got going on, you've got like a nice detail shot here on the right, showing that you've got stuff in between the cracks and things. It looks really cool. But for stuff like this, I would have your blend use the height map information of the cobbles or of the stones, because that will then make sure that the dirt hits the cracks first and then hits the top of the stones. And what that will do is that will help kind of ground these stones to look like they're actually sat like in a mucky puddle or a pile of dirt, rather than being just consistently flat, because this kind of, it doesn't sell that it's sitting on top of something, it just sells that it's another layer, and you don't want that. You want it to look like it's actually integrated into what's below it. So yeah, if you use your height map as a blend between them through linear interpretation, through a lerp node or something like that, then that will really help. Okay, so there's the fun PCG stuff. This is really cool to see. This is it's quite advanced stuff to do in regards to, you know, junior applicants and that kind of stuff. And like I said, normally you'd have tech artists do this kind of thing for a project, but if you've got this skill in your back pocket, it just shows that you can learn new skills and you're willing to try new things, and it's really good to see. Lampposts, nice. Okay, so is this going to be a road spline? Because it makes sense to have the road on the same one as the lampposts. It is, cool. Okay, good to see. Now we're seeing a lot of repetition in the textures there, and I appreciate we're quite pulled out, so there's a lot of stuff in display at once. But just be aware of that. You're going to have some breakup in your texturing, so that can be done via decals or vertex painting, and that's a very important environment art skill to have. So you got your modular pieces for the bank itself. Fewer pieces than I expected. I'm not sure what's going on here with these black elements. If it's meant to be grime, it's not really selling as grime, so I'd say just double check some reference and check that you're doing what you're seeing there. Also keep it consistent across your roof pieces. So here, for example, this looks pristine, and in the corner there's no dirt whatsoever. There's also no dirt on this angled piece, but there's dirt on the dome, which doesn't make a lot of sense. You'd expect it to be on all three of them, because they're all... The reason dirt and grime collects is because of weathering normally. So yeah, you want to make sure that it's all the same kind of thing. Because you've got some consistency going through these pieces, which is great. Again, I'd maybe tone down some of the dirt. It's quite extreme in places. Only because it gives you more scope for contrast elsewhere. You can always add stuff with additional decals and that kind of thing. But when it's in the texture itself, it's kind of hard to pull back from that. You got your floor pieces. Cool. This is good. Okay, you're using RGB masks to add additional grime and dirt. Good. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. You could do more of that. If it's not as contrasted, you'll notice more of that coming through. Because I didn't actually notice any moss. So if you're using moss in that, it's not really standing out because it's on top of such dark patches. But this is cool. I like. It's good to show you a reference. I like seeing this. Because it shows kind of your way of thinking about what you did and why you did it. So you've got this kind of patina with the dirt on it. I see what you're going for with the dome. But again, it needs to be consistent across the entirety of the roof. And some nice material reference there as well. Cool, and I believe that's everything. So yeah, great stuff overall. So yeah, if I was to talk about your portfolio as a whole, personally I would remove this last one. Possibly... honestly, I think if you're going for an environment art position, I would remove these last three. Because you're showing that you've got the modular abilities in these ones. And if you're going for, like, prop work, it's okay to mix prop work and environment work. But you kind of want to emphasize which one you want to be focusing on. So, like I said before, if you were to do a scene that, like you did with the Winchester, for example, if the Winchester was this gun instead, and you made a scene around it, that would be a better way of showing off that weapon than just having it as a separate prop if you're trying to be an environment artist. Prop art is great to do as well, and they go hand in hand for the most part, but if you want to be strictly an environment artist, then focusing on your kits and how you make them, and showing your breakdowns and all that kind of stuff, showing your textures, that is a better way of getting noticed for that kind of thing. So yeah, just remember, always remove your weakest links, and for me, they're the last three oldest things. I would remove those three. Maybe the shader as well, just because whilst it's nice to see you can do that, unless you've got a scene you can put it as part of, I would just get rid of it. So yeah, hopefully that's been useful. I know it's been quite long, and I apologize. It's the first one of these videos. I'm hoping to do a series of these to help people out. So yeah, if you have found this useful, let me know. If you have any questions about anything that I've said, let me know as well. And if anybody else out there watching would like their stuff looked at by me, then just let me know in the comments below. Thank you to Gabriele for showing me her work, and thank you everybody for watching. Have a great evening. See you later.